All right, in this video, we're going to go through some of the skills you might need if you were to bug out, or just skills that you would need to live off the grid. The skills we have now and the skills we'll need in the future will be in two entirely different things. I wrote a post in the past on the survivalistprepper.net website called Skills of Our Past Could Be Our Future. And learning these skills, these post-collapse skills or SHTF skills, if we learn those now, we just increase our chances for survival in the future if something like that did happen. So, you know, some of these skills we have right now because we've acquired them over our lifetime, and they involve what it takes to survive in modern society today. Some of these skills like computer skills, and we need people that are accountants, we need bookkeepers, we need financial advisors, we need short order cooks because there's fast food restaurants all over the place, and we need store clerks to buy our clothing, to get our food from Walmart and all of that stuff. So we have all of those skills that basically that we need those skills to survive in modern society. But what happens if everything's gone? Could we actually do these skills that people had to do 50 or 100 years ago? Get outside and actually work with our hands? Now, there's no crystal ball that we can see in the future, and nobody knows what's going to happen in the next 20 years or so. But as they say, if I only knew now what I knew, or if I only knew then what I know now. And wouldn't it be nice to learn some of these skills just in case, learn them now just in case that we do need them in the future. Now, an example of this is 20 years ago, I would have never guessed that I'd be living in the boonies and married to Lisa. 20 years ago, it was beyond my realm of possibility that I would be in this situation. I was stuck with my quote-unquote wonderful ex-wife in a dead-end job, working week to week just to pay the bills. And I'll spare you all the details, but I was basically going down the wrong path and going down that path fast. And if I didn't change the way I was doing things, I was going to be stuck in that rut forever, or even worse. But because I chose to change the way I did things and chose to take a realistic look at my future and change who I was, I put myself in a position to take advantage of the opportunities that presented themselves just 10 years ago, living with Lisa out here in the boonies and wearing my tinfoil hat. I see this country going down the wrong path and the same path. I see how brittle our society is, and I can't help but wonder how long it's going to be before the economy crumbles, or the food is no longer being delivered to the Walmart, and we're basically responsible for our own survival. So this is exactly why I want to learn these skills that will allow me to grow my own food, protect my family, heat my home without flipping a light switch that some public service company controls. Now, so whether you've decided to bug in or you're going to bug out when the poop hits the fan, there are some skills that are going to be absolutely necessary. And we can choose to learn some of these skills now, or we can wait until it becomes an absolute reality to grow our food, or we're going to die basically. So what are some of these skills? Let's say that you decide that you need to bug out, and you only have the supplies that you can take with you, or you already have stored. You're going to eventually run out of those supplies, and you're going to need to somehow become self-sustaining. Let's say that things have not totally broken down, but because of hyperinflation or overusage of natural resources, we're forced to become self-sufficient. We are going to need some of these skills whether we like it or not. Let's take gardening, for example. This is something that is a hobby for most of us today. In the future, gardening could become the only way for us to feed our family. Gardening as a hobby is far different than gardening for survival. If you plant corn and some crows come and eat 90% of your crop, sure, it's probably going to make you a little mad these days. But think about down the line, if that corn is your livelihood, that your family's livelihood, what are you going to do if those crows come and eat 90% of those crops? You're going to have to think about that stuff because there is no Walmart. Another skill is construction. A skill some of us are, some of us are good at, some of us are not so good at. Everybody can basically pound a nail into a 2x4, and I kind of lie somewhere in the middle here. I could build a doghouse, but it might take me a few tries. I couldn't build an entire house, but I learned these skills right now because these might be something valuable, in the future. In the future, there might not be a handyman to call when the roof springs a leak, or you might not have the means to pay for those services because of bartering or just how expensive it is, or there might not be anybody in your community that can do that. All of us can, probably patch a hole in the roof with a trash bag and some duct tape, but that's only going to last so long. So knowing some of these skills might be useful in the future. Another one is, or another few are hunting, trapping, and fishing, and acquiring meat. This will become a part of our daily lives, just like gardening will. And getting meat involves more than just going out and getting it, hunting and trapping, or owning the animals. We need to, after we get that meat, we need to be able to skin them. We need to be able to clean them. We need to get our hands dirty, and we also need to be able to preserve them, because depending on where we live, we're going to have to have some of that meat stored for those later months. Here in Colorado, we have winters where, all of that stuff is not as available as it is in the summertime. So we need to store that and kind of get through the winter. And that leads me to food preservation. Growing food, hunting, and ranching are great ways to become more self-sufficient, but we need to be able to can that food or dehydrate that food or, somehow preserve that food. And there are a lot of different ways to do this, a lot of different methods that can either be used alone or even in conjunction with together. But remember that just like everything, redundancy is key, and that goes for your food storage as well. And then we have the next one here. We have primitive skills like making tools, clothing, weapons, building shelter, finding water, foraging for wild edibles and stuff like that, and hunting, making fire, and skills like that have kind of been lost to modern society. I mean, these days, today, we can just go to the store and get some charcoal, and then we just flick our Bic, and then bam, we have a fire. But how many of us can actually make a fire without using a half a container of that charcoal fluid? A little tougher for most people than you would think. So when the poop finally or literally hits the fan, sanitation is going to become a bigger issue as time goes on in a post-collapse situation. And knowing how to make things like homemade soaps and detergents are not only going to be necessary to keep your home from smelling like a boys' locker room, like a teenage boys' locker room, but it's also going to be important because of disease and sickness and stuff like that. And as time goes on in a SHTF scenario, trash is going to build up. Death and decomposition are going to be everywhere, depending on the situation. And not maintaining your personal hygiene could lead to sickness and even death for you or your family members. So another thing here is first aid, and this is going to be a skill that everyone will need to know at some point or at some level or another. Nobody has to be a doctor or anything, but you're going to need to know some of the basic first aid skills. Unfortunately, we're going to have to use these at one point or another. And knowing the basics of wound care or how to treat injuries like broken bones, or even knowing how to stitch a wound or close a wound until you can get to somebody that can stitch that wound, are going to be skills that we're going to need in the future. And like I said, you don't need to be a doctor or a nurse or anything to utilize these skills, but just having the basic understanding of these is going to be important. Because you're not going to be able to go to the local Walgreens or your local pharmacy and pick up a prescription. You're going to have to research some herbal medicines and stuff like that. Those will be your only option in a post-collapse situation or scenario. And another important thing is alternative energies. What happens when the power grid goes down? Do you have another form of alternative energy like solar power or a battery bank, anything like that? Or do you know the process of making candles or making fuel or turning that fuel or some sort of fuel into electricity for you to run in your home? without the grid, if we don't have these systems in place, we're going to be forced to learn on our feet, so to speak. And if we're put in a situation where in that situation where we don't know these skills, we frankly might not survive. If the power goes out in the middle of winter and you don't have any way to heat your home, and or you're trying to start a fire that you thought you knew how to start, but you can't get it to start, it's going to be a pretty long winter or a pretty short winter, whichever way you look at it. So the next one here is water safety. Water filtration and purification could be one of the most critical skills to have. Even if the water is clear and looks like it's drinkable, it doesn't mean it is. There's all sorts of microorganisms like Giardia and Cryptosporidium that could make you very sick or even cause death. And knowing the differences between what filtering does and what purification does, and what chemicals you can use to make your water safe and drinkable are absolutely necessary. And in the off the grid course, we're going to go into a lot of detail about this same thing and go through the different techniques and all of that. So watch for that here in the near future, or it could be, depending on when you're watching this, it could already be on there. But anyway, without water, it doesn't matter how much food we have or the ability to start fire or anything. Without water, we can only last a couple of days. And after that, it really doesn't matter if you've got a cupboard full of food and all of this stuff. You're going to be dehydrated and eventually, die. I hate to say it that way, but the next one here is the survival mindset. This is one skill that encompasses kind of all of the skills above, but it's the survival mindset. And I've got a picture of Dave Canterbury here because it's that mental fortitude that you need to have to get through all of this stuff. And if you don't know something, you have to tell yourself, I'm going to do this. I need to figure out it's do or die in that situation. So the situation is going to be very different than it is today, and people are going to make different decisions than they do today. So people will do things in the future that you never thought they were capable of, good and bad. And it's up to us to decide what side of the fence that we want to be on. So do we want to be that person that is fighting for food and is willing to do whatever it takes to feed their family, or are we going to be that person like Dave Canterbury that can sustain themselves and do whatever it takes without having to harm somebody else? And that leads me to protection and self-defense. Weapons and crime are going to be a part of everyday life, and knowing how to defend yourself, your food, your family, your property, that's going to be an ongoing struggle, and especially in the early stages of a collapse, because people are going to be flipping out and they're going to be wanting what you have because they don't have anything. And whatever your opinions about guns are, I really think that everybody needs to take a look at that, because your views right now could be completely different in a post-collapse situation where it almost becomes a necessity. And even if it's not if using lethal force or anything like that, having some way to defend yourself and your family are going to be very valuable skills to have when everything kind of gets turned upside down or on its head. So lost skills of the past could be our future. And I just want to go through some of the skills that we didn't go through here, because there's a lot of different stuff that could be valuable in a post-collapse situation or a post-collapse community. Some stuff like sewing, quilting, and making your own clothes. This is stuff people that have skills are going to be the ones that kind of form that community. If somebody goes into a post-collapse situation and doesn't have any skills, they're going to basically be second class citizens. If you're not bringing any valuable tools or adding to the community, that you're not going to be very accepted. So knowing how to do stuff like sewing and quilting and making your own clothes is going to be a valuable tool. The cobbler making shoes, that's something that all the stuff that we have is eventually going to run out. So we need to have somebody that can make us a new pair of shoes. And blacksmiths and making tools, not only making tools but repairing the stuff that we have now. We need blacksmiths to, it could be even weapons or anything like that, anything that involves the metal, or it's something that you would need a blacksmith for. in architects and engineers, because we're going to have to rebuild, and these guys might not be all that valuable in the very beginning unless they have other skills. But eventually we're going to need to rebuild. And if you don't know how to build that house, you're going to need that architect to come and tell you, hey, if you don't put this 2x4 right here, that whole roof is coming down on you. And then alcohol production, and I put this in with black market, but this doesn't mean that all alcohol production is going to be bad. Alcohol has medical uses, and all of that as well. But people will be taking advantage of this stuff. Just like in the Depression, alcohol consumption rose, drugs, suicides. People want to escape from reality. So there is going to be a black market for stuff like this. And teachers and trainers are always going to be important, because you're going to have to teach the younger generation, or even the people that don't have these skills, but they're willing to learn these skills. You're going to need people to teach them those skills. And trainers, I mean, this could be self-defense. If your community isn't the best at, tactics and defense tactics and stuff like that, you're going to need those trainers to teach the community. And then electricians and mechanics, and this is kind of the same thing as architects and engineers, but you're going to need people to put this stuff back together. We're going to still have all of this stuff. We're still going to have the cars and everything, but getting it to work might take a little bit of ingenuity. And if you've got a mechanic that knows the systems, or an electrician that knows how to do everything, that knows how everything's supposed to go together, you have a better chance of getting that stuff done. And like it or not, we're going to need politicians and in a situation like that, because we're going to need leaders, and we're going to need the right leaders. There's going to be groups that pop up that are the wrong groups, and there's going to be false prophets, and there's going to be all of that stuff. But we need the right leaders in place. We need a police force. Us as a community, we need rules. So we're going to need that police force, and we're going to need military for protection and all of that stuff. And then biologists and scientists for obvious reasons as well, because we're going to, as we grow as a community, we're going to need these guys that have this knowledge that we don't. Why does this stuff work? And what can we do to, maybe the architect works together with the scientist or the biologist, or, the biologist works with the farmer or the rancher. We're going to need all of this to create a thriving society and build a better group. And, this is by no means all of the different skills or anything, but just keep in mind that as you're living off the grid, you're going to need those basic skills like we talked about in the beginning, the gardening, the farming, to sustain yourself. But eventually, if you have any of these skills, or you can kind of learn these skills now, eventually, if something does, God forbid, if something does happen and everything just goes to crap, we have some of these skills, and we can be a valuable part of any community, and therefore kind of increasing our defenses and our survival rate, I suppose, our odds for survival, and also helping to rebuild this community. So I appreciate everybody watching this video, and we'll see you guys in the next video.